The story of Mahabharata. The Bhagavad Gita was taught by Lord Krishna to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. The two armies of the Pandavas and the Kauravas were gathered on the field for war. Just before the commencement of the war, Arjuna, the commander in chief of the Pandava army, felt dejected and sought the advice of Sri Krishna, who was driving his chariot. Sri Krishna gave out the Bhagavad Gita to him. Listening to the divine song, Arjuna shed his dejection, fought the war, and gained victory. How and why the two armies met there for war is contained in the great epic of the Mahabharata, written by Vyasa Maharishi. The epic contains nearly 1 lakh of the shlokas in Sanskrit. In it, the story of the great men and women belonging to the Kuru dynasty is described in a masterly way. No other book has its variety of characters or of situations, and it is a masterpiece of perfection from a literary point of view. No drama can compete with the Mahabharata in its climaxes or the dramatic sequences. Let us see how the story begins and develops. Shantanu was the king of Hastinapur and a descendant of the Kuru dynasty. He was young, handsome, and unmarried. One day he went to take a stroll on the banks of the river Ganges. There he saw a beautiful lady and fell in love with her. He proposed to her. She agreed to wed the king on the condition that he would not interfere with her freedom. She warned him that if he even raised an objection to any of her actions, she would leave him and go away. Shantanu agreed and they got married. After 1 year, a boy was born to them. She took the baby and threw him into the river. Shantanu was shocked, but he remembered his wife's condition and kept quiet. This incident was repeated 7 times. But when the 8th child was born, Shantanu could not contain himself. He said, "Who are you, O wicked woman? You have killed all our innocent children." She said, "Alas, king, I am the river Ganga. I had to throw our children into the river to redeem them from a curse. We could have kept this one and lived happily, but you have broken your promise and I must go back whence I came." She left the child with Shantanu and the young prince came to be known as Devavrata. Both father and son loved each other very much. When Devavrata grew up, he was crowned as the heir apparent. He started helping Shantanu in the affairs of the kingdom. One day, Shantanu went hunting and fell in love with a beautiful fisherwoman called Satyavati. He met her father and sought her hand in marriage. The fisherman asked for an assurance that his grandson would be made the heir apparent. What a gross injustice to Devavrata! Shantanu was appalled to hear the condition and returned home dejected. Devavrata noticed his father's dejection and soon found out the reason for it. He loved his father so much that no sacrifice was too great for him. So he approached the fisherman directly and took a severe vow that he would not claim the throne after his father. He also promised never to marry so that he would have no descendants to claim the throne. Because of this fierce vow taken by him, he came to be known as Bhishma. Thus the marriage took place and Shantanu had 2 children by his second wife. Time passed and he died. Crowning his young half-brothers as crown princes, Bhishma looked after the kingdom on their behalf. One prince died very young. The other married 2 princesses, but he too died without leaving children. The old queen was distraught with sorrow. Now there was no heir to the throne. She asked Bhishma to get married and ascend the throne. But Bhishma was firm and not willing to break a sacred vow solemnly taken. Now the queen had a son by a previous marriage, the great Rishi Vedavyasa. So, according to the prevalent custom, she requested him to father the children of her daughters-in-law. In time, they bore a son each. One of them was born blind and was called Dhritarashtra. The other was afflicted by the yellow disease from birth itself and was called Pandu. Though a blind man could not ascend the throne, Pandu, because of his love for his elder brother, crowned him king and he himself went around expanding the kingdom. In time, Dhritarashtra married a princess called Gandhari. As her husband was blind, she did not want to enjoy what her husband could not. So she put a bandage over her eyes. To them, 100 sons and a daughter were born. The sons were together called Kauravas. The eldest among them was known as Duryodhana. Pandu wedded two princesses, Kunti and Madri. But he had been cursed that he would not have any children. Pandu was very dejected. He retired from life and went away to the forest along with his wives to live as a recluse, leaving the kingdom to Dhritarashtra and his sons. But in the forest, Kunti and Madri propitiated the gods, and 5 sons were born to them. Their names were Dharmaraja, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva, and they were together known as the Pandavas. Pandu died while in the forest, and Madri burnt herself on her husband's funeral pyre. So Kunti was left to look after the 5 children. Unable to live in the forest alone with the 5 children, she returned to the kingdom. Thus the Kauravas and the Pandavas grew up together. Bhishma looked after them all, and Dronacharya taught them archery. The Pandavas surpassed the Kauravas in their conduct, intelligence, and qualities of the heart. Moreover, Dharmaraja, being the eldest, was the rightful heir to the throne. All this made the Kauravas very jealous. There was often bitter strife among them. Finally, Duryodhana tried to get the Pandavas burnt alive in a house made of lac. The Pandavas came to know of it beforehand and escaped by setting fire to the house themselves. They ran away into the forest and wandered in disguise for some time. There they came to know of the Swayamvara of a princess called Draupadi, the daughter of Draupada, and decided to contest for her hand. It was a severe test. The winner would get the princess. Arjuna succeeded where all the other princes failed, and as their mother told them to share everything, the 5 Pandavas married Draupadi together. Now that the Pandavas had the support of a powerful king, Dhritarashtra thought it proper to recognize the right of the Pandavas to the kingdom. He divided the kingdom into 2 and gave half of it to them. Dharmaraja was crowned as king, and they soon expanded their kingdom by dint of their valor. A great sacrifice was performed, to which all kings, including the Kauravas, were invited. Duryodhana could hardly bear to see their splendor. Taking advantage of his father's attachment for him, Duryodhana contrived to invite the Pandavas for a game of dice with high stakes. Dharmaraja had to play against Shakuni, the maternal uncle of the Kauravas. Shakuni was an adept in the game and also a cheat, while Dharmaraja was immature. He lost again and again until at last he lost not only his whole kingdom but also the freedom of all the 5 brothers as well as that of Draupadi. Intoxicated with this fraudulent victory, Duryodhana had Draupadi dragged to the assembly and sought to insult her further by denuding her. In her helpless condition, Draupadi fervently prayed to Lord Krishna, who blessed her with an unending quantity of cloth which increased by itself on her body. Dhritarashtra felt ashamed at the deed of his sons. He gave back the Pandavas their freedom as well as their kingdom. But Duryodhana contrived to get Dharmaraja to play the game once more, again with Shakuni. This time the loser would have to spend 12 years in the forest and 1 year incognito without being discovered by the other party. If their whereabouts were discovered before the year was over, then the forfeit would have to be repeated, 12 years in the forest and 1 year incognito. The Pandavas lost again and went to the forest. After 12 years, they disguised themselves and unknown to anyone dwelt in the court of King Virata. But Duryodhana was always on the watch to discover their whereabouts so that he could send them once again into exile. The Pandavas were very righteous, and wherever they lived, the kingdom prospered. Finding out from spies that Virata's kingdom had become very prosperous all of a sudden, Duryodhana was sure that the Pandavas were there, and he prepared a scheme by which he could discover them before the year was over. Virata's cattle were seized simultaneously from the south and the north, so that the Pandavas would have to come and help the king. The Pandavas did come out of hiding, but fortunately by then the year was over. Now that the conditions of the bet were fully satisfied, the Pandavas wanted their kingdom back from the Kauravas, but Duryodhana would not yield it. Messages, talks, compromise proposals all failed. Finally, Lord Krishna himself went on behalf of the Pandavas. Dharmaraja was willing to be satisfied with 5 villages even, but Duryodhana was adamant. He haughtily declared that he would not yield even an inch to the Pandavas. He even tried to arrest Krishna. Krishna escaped by dazzling them all with his cosmic form. So, war was declared. The place and the time were fixed. Both the armies gathered on the battlefield of Kurukshetra and arrayed themselves opposite each other. The Kauravas had 11 units of army, while the Pandavas had 7. Conches were blown and trumpets sounded. The war was about to begin. It was at this time that the most dynamic scripture of all times, the Bhagavad Gita, was given out to Arjuna by Sri Krishna.